Hi, this is Dr. Tim Green, and I'm here with Dr. Charles Reigeluth, Professor Emeritus of Instructional Systems Technology at Indiana University. He was there for 25 years. Well, actually, he's still there, retired, but he taught there officially for 25 years. And prior to that, Dr. Reigeluth was at Syracuse University for 10 years. Dr. Reigeluth's research interests focus on paradigm change in public education, the design of high-quality instruction, and the design of technology systems for the learner-centered paradigm of education. And I have to say I was fortunate enough to be in one of Dr. Reigeluth's classes as a doc student, and his class on systems design of educational systems really changed the way that I look at the whole educational system. So I enjoyed that time. I appreciate you taking your time, Dr. Reigeluth, to let me interview you. So welcome.
My pleasure. Well, thank you for being interested in interviewing me. I thought I might say a couple of words, just a little human interest here. I taught high school for 3 years, so I have a little bit of experience within the current educational system other than as a student. And in addition to that, I worked on a farm in Argentina for 3 years, something not many people know about me. It gave me a very different perspective about the U.S. living outside of it for 3 years. Some people say I only did it because I wanted to be outstanding in my field.
Very nice.
So let's get on with it.
So those are some good tips. I actually knew those two things about you, but I know most other people probably don't. If you're in the field of instructional design, educational technology, you've no doubt read some of Dr. Reigeluth's work. Affectionately, we call it the Green Book, with all the instructional models and strategies in it. That is one of your book that people no doubt have read. But we're here to talk about one of your latest book, titled Reinventing Schools. It's Time to Break the Mold, and it's a book you co-authored. What was the impetus for writing your new book?
Well, the major impetus was just a real conviction that our educational system is not performing the way we need it to perform. And we've kind of recognized that ever since Sputnik in the 1960s, certainly with the Nation at Risk report in the 1980s. And yet we keep engaging in the same kinds of piecemeal reforms that have gotten us nowhere over the past 50 years. And therefore, I strongly believe that the only way to improve our current systems at all is to fundamentally change the structure of the system. And therefore, the purpose of this book was, it's my first book that's written for a general audience as opposed to a scholarly audience or graduate students. And I wrote it for that audience because I feel it's so important to help many people understand that only paradigm change can solve our educational problems. And the people need to get some idea of what the new paradigm should be like. And people also need to learn a bit about how to bring about paradigm change within their school systems.
So you mentioned, and as you just did, the new paradigm. Can you talk a little bit more about what your vision is of this new paradigm?
Yeah, it's really born out of the recognition that people learn at different rates. And yet in our current paradigm of education, we try to teach a fixed amount of content in a fixed amount of time. So we make it like a race to see which students can learn in the amount of time given, and we flunk out the rest. By holding time constant, we force achievement to vary. And so when you really think about it, our educational system isn't designed for learning so much as it is for sorting students. And actually that made a lot of sense in the industrial age when we couldn't afford to educate many people to high levels. And they didn't need to be educated to high levels because manual labor was the predominant form of work. But now that knowledge work has become the predominant form of work, we really need to educate far more people to far higher levels. And so rather than holding time constant, which forces achievement to vary, We need to turn that around. We need to hold achievement constant at a mastery level and allow every student as much time as they need to reach mastery, and allow them to move on as soon as they reach mastery. We're really squandering an awful lot of our top talent by holding them back for the rest of the class. They should be allowed to move on as soon as they've mastered it. So we really need a dramatic change in the system from time-based student progress to learning-based student progress, which requires changes in teachers' roles, students' roles, the role of technology for us technologists. Even the role of parents needs to change quite dramatically. So it's not a matter of piecemeal change. People today don't really think in terms of a school being possible without grade levels and courses and grades. Well, we didn't have any of those things in the one-room schoolhouse. We don't have to have those kinds of features in education. We can design an education system that is much more tailored to meeting individual students' needs than what we have now. But it requires paradigm change, not piecemeal change. So that's what the book is all about. It helps people to understand what paradigm change is, why it's needed, and how to help bring it about.
So you mentioned new roles for teachers, and I'm really interested in that concept as someone who is involved in teacher education. What do you see the new roles of teachers taking on in this new paradigm?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The simple short answer is the teachers need to be the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage. But to expand on that a little bit, the first thing teachers need to be is a designer of student work. Rather than the teacher being one to do all the work, which doesn't work, we need teachers to be the designers of student work. And project-based learning is ideal for capitalizing on that, learning by doing. So that's really the first role. Now, as more and more projects are designed and put into project banks, then the teacher's role may become more one of selector of student work. But students should also be involved in both designing and selecting the work that they do. A second major role for teachers is being the facilitator of student work. They need to support the students as the students are doing the work. They need to help motivate the students, inspire the students, provide instructional support when needed, support them in various ways as they are working on their projects. A third major role for teachers is that of being a mentor to the students. One of the most important things in the development of any child is to develop strong relationships and to have an adult who really cares about you and gets to know you over a period of years instead of just being with you for 1 year. That's extremely important for child development. So a very important role of the teacher is being a multi-year mentor for each student. And finally, the teacher needs to be a learner. The teacher needs to learn about students, for students, and with students. And that role is extremely important. The teacher should not try to come across as omniscient.
Excellent. So how do you see teacher education needing to change to help prepare teachers with these roles? Is it being, and I guess a kind of a side question with that is, are there places where that's being done well in your opinion?
Well, no, I don't think so. We have a chicken and egg problem. The schools that are hiring teachers are in the industrial age model, the factory model of schools. So schools of ed need to prepare teachers for that kind of a role. If schools of ed were to all transform overnight and start preparing students for the learner-centered paradigm, they wouldn't be prepared for the roles that they would be hired for. So that creates a tremendous problem. I've become convinced that initially we need to provide teacher training needs through in-service development rather than pre-service development. We need to take the teachers that are there and retrain them for their new roles, rather than expecting that schools of education can meet this, solve this chicken and egg problem. So what kind of retraining is needed? Well, for one thing, I think less focus on content knowledge is important. As it is now, people seem to think that all you need to do is know your subject in order to teach it. And that's a very false assumption. But given the new roles for the teacher, there needs to be much more focus on psychology. Learning how people think, how people develop, human development, counseling, learning how to counsel students through the myriad problems that they encounter as they're growing up, interpersonal relationships, how to cultivate strong interpersonal relationships. And in addition to those kinds of things that are really concerned with the whole student, there's also a need for a better understanding of project-based learning, since the teachers need to be designers of, or at least selectors of, student work, and they need to be much more skilled at tutoring strategies, how to provide just-in-time instructional support as students are working on their projects. So those are the major differences that I see in terms of teacher preparation.
So kind of just to summarize, you believe focusing on those who are already out in the field, giving them the professional development to change, so the in-service teachers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then after a critical mass of schools has transformed to the new paradigm, then teacher preparation programs are going to need to prepare students, and there'll be a lot of demand at that point for them to prepare students for that kind of a context.
Excellent. So I always like to end the interviews with an advice question. So you can take this in any direction you would like. So what are the top 2-3 pieces of advice that you have for teachers or teacher educators, instructional designers, educational technologists, or really any stakeholders in general, for helping reinvent schools to the paradigm you describe in your book?
Okay. Yeah, perhaps there are two categories of advice I'd give. One for succeeding within a new paradigm school, and the other for helping a school system to transform to the new paradigm school.
Yes.
So for the first one, to succeed within a new paradigm school, I think that learning a lot about project-based learning or problem-based learning, how to design good projects, how to facilitate projects, how to help students to design their own projects and manage their own projects, how to foster self-directed learning. Those are all very important kinds of things. In addition to that, the notion of just-in-time tutoring that I mentioned, so that during a project the teacher can provide some direct instruction to students who lack certain competencies for proceeding in their project. And basically supporting students in emotionally, socially, psychologically, as in the role of guide on the side. And one thing that I think will help a lot to accomplish those things is to visit a new paradigm school. In our new book, Reinventing Schools, we provide a list of over 140 schools that have met a number of the criteria for being within the new paradigm. And there's nothing quite like visiting a school and seeing learner-centered instruction in action to help prepare you for that kind of a role. I certainly envision in the future that internships will be a regular part of teacher preparation, where you will not only visit but actually work within a learner-centered school in order to develop your skills for that kind of teaching. Now, for the second part, to help a school system to transform to the new paradigm, here I think that systems thinking is crucial, like you encountered in my course. And studying some new paradigm schools, taking a good look at what those schools are like and looking at how they either transformed or developed into that kind of a system. There are, I think, two levels on which teachers can work for paradigm change. One of them is the school level, but there I caution that that will only work within a charter school system, because only charter schools have the freedom to make the kinds of fundamental changes that we're talking about here. If you're within a public school district, then the school district has got to be the unit of change, not the individual school. You've got to help the school district to form a district-wide leadership team that will explore the prospect of transforming to the new paradigm. And so it's a lot harder on the district level. It's a lot easier for a single charter school to transform. But it's a big mistake to try to just change one school within a school district. We've seen many promising model schools be created within school districts only to die off within a couple of years, because fundamental change makes them incompatible with the rest of the school district. And so the rest of the school district works to change it back to what it was before. And this has happened so many times over the past 50 years, it's hard to count them all.
Excellent. Thank you for that advice. So again, I want to thank you, Dr. Reigeluth, for taking your time to talk about learner-centered paradigm of education in your new book, Reinventing Schools, It's Time to Break the Mold. So thank you for taking your time to talk about this.
Great. There's one final comment I'd like to make, if you have a minute.
Of course.
Okay. That is that the only way paradigm change is going to happen is if people understand what it is and why it's needed. And therefore, I'd like to encourage all of your students to help spread the word, to help other people to understand what paradigm change is and why it's needed so desperately today. It's only through their efforts that this kind of change is going to happen in a timely manner.
Excellent. I couldn't agree with you more. Again, thank you, Dr. Reigeluth. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Tim.